I never imagined this moment would come, but it did. I stood there, frozen, while the applause rained down around me. The 20th anniversary gala for Kane Kids had been my dream for months. And yet, as my parents announced that Lennox, my younger sister, would soon be taking full control of the company, I felt my world unravel. The applause thundered in my ears, but I heard nothing, not one word. It was like I was drowning in the noise, unable to escape it. There was nothing left for me. As they stood there, arms linked, smiling at the crowd, I couldn't help but think, how could they do this? After all these years, everything I'd poured into this company, the sleepless nights, the fights to keep the doors open, the sacrifices. How could they hand it all over to Lennox, the one person who never truly earned it? My name, Bristol Kane, had been erased in one swift announcement. In front of 400 people, my parents spoke of their pride in Lennox, their belief that she was the future of this brand, our brand, the brand I had worked my fingers to the bone for. I excused myself and walked upstairs to the executive suite, where I still had the code to access the safe. I opened the safe, and what I saw inside shattered me. The new will, signed just 3 months ago. Everything was being handed over to Lennox. The company, the house, the accounts, the investments, all of it. My name was listed exactly once, and it wasn't as the rightful heir. It was as a mere afterthought, $200,000 as a gesture of gratitude for my dedicated service. Tears pricked at the back of my eyes as I stood there, holding the will. But no tears came. The shock had taken that from me. I had given up my youth, my dreams, everything to build this company, and it had been wiped away with one signature. I wasn't even worth a second thought. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when I was 18 years old. Back then, Kane Kids was just a dream. My parents had started the company with a vision to create the most exclusive, high-end children's clothing brand. We opened our first store in Greenwich Avenue, right in the heart of Connecticut, surrounded by wealth and prestige. The windows were always adorned with the finest pieces, hand-embroidered bonnets from France, cashmere coats lined with silk, tiny leather shoes from Italy, pieces that most people could only dream of owning, let alone affording. Our clients weren't just the rich, they were the elite. But then the financial crisis hit. The economy collapsed without warning, and everything changed. Our suppliers cut us off, wealthy clients stopped spending, and one morning, a letter arrived at the house from the bank. It was a formal demand for full repayment of a $2.8 million loan that we had no way of covering. I remember walking downstairs to find my dad, Dennis Kane, sitting at the kitchen table, motionless, while my mom, Brenda Kane, folded and refolded the foreclosure notice in her hands. Her fingers were shaking, but her face was stone. I had just received a full scholarship to Parsons School of Design in New York City, the kind of scholarship that changes lives, but my parents didn't even need to ask. They didn't have to say anything for me to know what I had to do. I called the admissions office, thanked them for the opportunity, and explained that my family needed me more. I drove home that afternoon, filled the back of my car with everything I owned, and never looked back. I stepped into the role my parents had always expected me to play. I opened the stores at 7 a.m. and worked the floor until closing. But that wasn't enough. I had to do more to save us. Almost no one in retail understood social media at the time, but I saw its potential. I taught myself everything from photography to Instagram algorithms and stretched a $20 daily ad budget into actual sales. When suppliers refused to work with us, I took matters into my own hands. I drove to Manhattan at 5 inches the morning, negotiated with wholesalers in the garment district, and carried the boxes back myself. Every ounce of my energy went into keeping the store running, and slowly, bit by bit, we clawed our way back from the edge of bankruptcy. It was a slow climb, but we made it. We paid down the most dangerous debt, refinanced what we could, redesigned the stores with brighter lighting and better flow, and launched our own private label collection. New locations were opening, and Kane Kids began to thrive again. Every new store felt like a victory, one we weren't sure we deserved, but one we fought for every single day. At staff meetings, vendor dinners, and grand opening parties, my parents would wrap an arm around my shoulders and say those words, "One day, all of this will be yours, Bristol." It was said so often that everyone knew it was my future. And for a long time, I believed it. But something changed when Lennox graduated college and moved back into the family house. While I had been putting in the hard work to save Kane kids, Lennox had been enjoying a carefree life. She never had to worry about rent or bills. Her Range Rover was handed to her on her 16th birthday, and she spent her summers in Paris, while I was counting pennies to make ends meet. When Lennox moved back home, my parents had big plans for her. They created a brand new executive position for her, creative director, a 6-figure salary, benefits, company car, and an expense account for inspiration trips. The problem? Lennox had never worked a day in her life. She had no experience in the industry, no understanding of what it took to run the company. Meanwhile, I was the one who had been running the company day in and day out, putting in 90-hour weeks, overseeing every detail, and keeping things afloat. But instead of recognizing my hard work, my parents threw Lennox into the spotlight. She had never touched a design program like Adobe Illustrator, never worked a holiday rush, and certainly never carried the weight of an entire company on her shoulders. But there she was, handed a title and responsibilities she wasn't prepared for, while I silently picked up every piece she left behind. It wasn't long before the cracks started to show. Lennox missed production deadlines because she was partying in the Hamptons, told a senior buyer that their 4-year-old looked a little chunky, and even scheduled a photo shoot during peak hours, kicking paying customers out of the store. Each time, it was me who had to pick up the pieces. My phone would ring in the middle of the night, and I'd be back on a plane to fix the damage she'd caused. But my parents didn't see it as a problem. They framed her Instagram posts and hung them in the corporate office. To them, Lennox was bringing a fresh Gen Z perspective to the company. Meanwhile, I was working myself to the bone, trying to keep things together. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that they would eventually see the truth. But as time passed, it became clear Lennox was the golden child, and I was just the one who did all the hard work. It all came to a head when Lennox was given the lead role in one of our biggest projects of the year, a $1.2 million holiday placement with one of the most prestigious luxury department store chains in Manhattan. This deal was everything. I had worked tirelessly for months, flying across the country, curating collections, sending out countless lookbooks at 3 a.m., and negotiating margins with vendors until my eyes felt like they were burning. It was my time to shine. It was my chance to prove that all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, and all the hard work had led to something real. But when the big day came, Lennox was nowhere to be found. I received a text at 7 a.m. saying she would be a little late because she had stopped for a quick photo shoot in Soho with some friends who had millions of Instagram followers. I tried to hold it together. I told myself, it's just one mistake. She'll make it right. But then the hours stretched on. By 11 a.m., she walked into the meeting room 3 hours late, holding an iced oat milk latte, sunglasses on, with absolutely no sense of urgency. The buyers were already seated, waiting for her presentation. But instead of apologizing for the delay, Lennox casually asked if they could push the meeting back a little. The buyers, understandably, stood up and walked out. That was the moment everything changed. I remember sitting there, watching them leave, my heart sinking with each step they took. I knew we had just lost everything. All the months of work, all the negotiations, gone in an instant because of one careless mistake. And what did my parents do? They brushed it off. My mom smiled at Lennox and said, "Don't worry, darling, you'll get them next time." She rubbed Lennox's back like she was a child who had just made an innocent mistake. That's when I snapped. I had been holding it together for years, sacrificing my life for this company, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The betrayal from my parents was one thing, but this was the moment I realized that nothing would ever change. I had been the one to pull the company out of bankruptcy. I had been the one to keep everything together when no one else was willing to put in the work. And yet, here I was, overworked, undervalued, and replaced by someone who was handed everything without lifting a finger. That night, after the disaster with Lennox, I couldn't sleep. My phone kept buzzing with emails from the team, trying to salvage the mess we had just created. I felt like I was suffocating. My entire body was shaking, and my mind was running in circles. At 3 a.m., I found myself pacing the apartment, trying to process everything that had happened. And then it hit me, the final straw. My parents had made their decision, and they had made it clear. No amount of hard work, loyalty, or dedication would ever be enough. It didn't matter that I had built this company with my blood, sweat, and tears. I wasn't the one they wanted. I had spent 12 years believing that Kane Kids was my legacy, that it was all going to be mine one day. But in that moment, I realized that my parents had never truly intended for me to have it. They had made up their minds long ago, and no matter how hard I worked, Lennox was always going to be the golden child. I couldn't let that be my future. I couldn't stay in a place where I was constantly undervalued and ignored. And for the first time, I realized something else. I didn't need them. I had spent my entire adult life trying to please my parents, trying to prove that I was worthy of what I had earned. But now, I saw clearly. My worth wasn't tied to their approval. It was tied to what I could build on my own. The decision was made. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I wasn't going to let Lennox take my place. I knew that I had the skills, the knowledge, and the network to start something new, something that was truly mine. I spent the next few days planning. I couldn't take the brand, but I could take my expertise and my reputation. The contacts I had built over the years, vendors, suppliers, clients, these people trusted me, not my family. I could start fresh, and I would. I also had the one thing they couldn't take away from me, my own money. Over the years, I had reinvested every penny I earned back into the company. I had taken a modest salary and kept every bonus as a loan to the business. My financial advisor had always warned me to protect myself, but I had trusted my family. Now, I had $2.9 million in documented loans to the company, money that was legally mine. I made the call to my Aunt Wanda, the only one in my family who had warned me about the betrayal I could see coming. She listened patiently to everything I had been through, and then, without hesitation, she handed me a check for $300,000. "This is seed money," she said. "It's not charity. You're going to build something that no one can take from you." With that money, I rented a small office above a bakery in Soho. I called every contact I had built over the years, every person who had believed in me when the company was struggling, and piece by piece, I started to build something new. Bristol Kane Studio. I knew that it wouldn't be easy. I knew that starting from scratch meant sacrificing everything I had worked for. But there was something freeing about it, something empowering. For the first time, I was doing something for myself. I wasn't working to please anyone else. I wasn't working to earn a spot in a family that had already chosen who they wanted. And within 6 months of launching Bristol Kane Studio, we sold out our entire collection in just 6 hours. The clients came back. They didn't care about family drama. They cared about the quality, the exclusivity, and the vision I had always provided. Kane Kids, on the other hand, started to unravel. I heard whispers of failed contracts, unfulfilled promises, and financial trouble. My parents' secret loans came to light, and their empire was crumbling. With Aunt Wanda's support and the money she gave me, I was finally free to create something that was entirely mine. No one could take it from me, and no one would be able to destroy it, no matter how hard they tried. Bristol Kane Studio was born out of frustration, determination, and a desire to prove to myself that I didn't need anyone else's approval to succeed. The first few weeks were a blur. I spent every waking hour curating a collection that reflected my true vision. I knew the market, my old clients were still out there, hungry for the high-end, exclusive pieces that Kane Kids had once offered. But this time, I was going to do it differently. No middlemen, no department store markdowns, just me, my designs, and the people who had supported me throughout the years. I found a small, modest office space above a bakery in Soho. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. I didn't need anything grand, not yet. I called in favors from old suppliers, the ones who had always trusted me during the difficult years at Kane Kids. The first 2 people who showed up at my door were Rocco Moretti and Bianca Salazar, 2 of the best store managers we had ever had at Kane Kids. They walked away from their 6-figure salaries to work with me. And with them, they brought a loyal VIP client list mothers who didn't care about the family drama. They cared about the quality, the designs, and most importantly, me. The first collection was a small capsule, just 12 perfect pieces in organic Pima cotton and hand-loomed cashmere, sourced from the same mills I had fought to keep alive during the Kane Kids crisis. I was directly involved in every stitch, every detail. And when the collection dropped, it was a success beyond my wildest dreams. The entire inventory sold out in 6 hours. No markdowns, no discounts, just pure, unadulterated demand. As the orders kept rolling in, I realized just how much I had underestimated my ability to build something from the ground up. It wasn't just about the clothes, it was about the trust people had in me, the trust I had worked hard to cultivate. The brand was quickly gaining traction, and more importantly, I was finally living life on my own terms. With each passing day, I became more certain that Kane Kids was behind me, not in front of me. The clients who once supported my parents, the ones who had walked away with my loyalty and my hard work, were now coming back. They had been waiting for someone who truly understood what they wanted, someone who would never treat them like a transaction. And I was that someone. As the business grew, so did the challenges. I had to make tough decisions, hiring the right people, maintaining the quality I had promised, and keeping up with the pressure of success. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone in it. I was surrounded by a team that believed in me, not because of my last name, but because of the work we were doing together. The support I received from my clients, friends, and former colleagues was overwhelming. They were rooting for me in a way that my family never had. I was finally doing what I had always dreamed of without anyone looking over my shoulder, and it felt incredible. Meanwhile, Kane Kids was falling apart. The rumors were true. My parents had quietly pledged their personal shares as collateral for a secret $4 million line of credit that they had used to cover Lennox's lavish lifestyle and plug the operating losses from her disastrous management. What they didn't know was that all those years, I had been meticulously documenting every penny I had invested in the company. My $2.9 million in shareholder loans had become the most secured debt on the books. I knew the day would come when I would have to use it, and now that day had arrived. Through a clean third-party purchase, I bought the entire $4 million note for pennies on the dollar. I waited for the bank to mark the loan distressed, and once it did, I moved quickly. I filed formal acceleration on the debt and demanded immediate repayment. The bank had no choice but to start liquidating the company's assets to cover the loan. The liquidation of Kane Kids was as clinical as it was inevitable. The stores closed one by one. Every asset was sold to satisfy creditors in order of priority. My shareholder loan stood first in line. No emotion, no drama, just the law, and the law worked in my favor. The end of Kane Kids was swift. Within weeks, my parents were forced to sell their home on Round Hill Road. The luxurious life they had built over decades was gone. They moved into a small two-bedroom apartment in Stamford, driving a 2-year-old Honda. Their country club memberships were canceled. They went from wealthy entrepreneurs to struggling retirees overnight. Lennox, who had always been pampered, lost everything. The Range Rover was repossessed, the black card, the Instagram followers, everything she had taken for granted was gone. Word was, she was working retail in a mall in Westchester, trying to make ends meet. But I didn't take joy in their downfall. Not anymore. It wasn't about revenge, it was about consequence. It was about doing what was necessary to protect myself, to build something that could never be taken away. I had spent years sacrificing my life, my health, and my happiness for the sake of a company that had never truly been mine. But now, I was finally free. The final blow came when I sent one letter to my parents, addressed to the corporate office. It was a simple note on a cream-colored sheet of stock paper. Thank you for the 12 years of lessons. Regards, Bristol Kane, CEO and 100% owner, Bristol Kane Studio. It wasn't about rubbing it in. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about acknowledging the fact that I had built something on my own, without their help, without their approval, and without their betrayal. Today, Bristol Kane Studio is a thriving global brand, carried in over 40 countries. We have a team of over 200 people who are paid what they are truly worth. And as for me, I own every stitch, every trademark, and every brick of the flagship store I opened on Madison Avenue on the exact corner where Kane Kids once stood. My story isn't about revenge. It's about redemption. It's about taking back control of your own life, even when everything seems lost. Blood may be thicker than water, but contracts are thicker than blood. And the law doesn't care who cried harder at Christmas dinner. Through it all, I've learned that loyalty without documentation is just a story you tell yourself while someone else spends your money. I learned that one day, all of this will be yours means nothing unless it's in writing, witnessed, and legally binding. But most importantly, I've learned that the people who love you the most can still destroy you if you let them, and I will never let that happen again. 4 months after walking away from Kane Kids, after everything had fallen apart and my parents' empire had crumbled, I opened the doors to my first pop-up shop. It was small, barely 1,200 square feet, but it was mine. Every piece in the collection was designed by me, sourced by me, and created for the people who believed in quality over everything else. The response was overwhelming. Every single piece sold out within 6 hours, a testament to the brand I had built on my own terms. My mind raced as I looked around at the empty shelves, knowing the journey was just beginning. The money I had borrowed from Aunt Wanda wasn't just seed money. It was my ticket to independence, a chance to prove to myself that I could make it on my own. The first collection had been everything I wanted it to be. High-end, exclusive, and priced to reflect the luxury it offered. It wasn't about showing off or getting validation from others. It was about building something meaningful, something that would never be taken away from me again. As word spread, I began receiving calls and messages from former clients, the ones who had bought from Kane Kids but had stopped when things started falling apart. They wanted something different, something real. They didn't care about family drama. They cared about the clothes. They cared about me. But success wasn't as simple as designing a collection and selling it. The pressure never really went away. I had to deal with the legal aspects, ensuring that everything I created was protected. I had to grow the business, hire the right people, and keep the momentum going. Every day brought new challenges, but for the first time, I was doing it for myself, not for a company that saw me as expendable. The first challenge came when the inevitable comparison to Kane Kids started. People wanted to know how it felt to compete with my old company, how it felt to have taken everything away from my family. But I didn't see it that way. I had not destroyed them, they had destroyed themselves. And the worst part, they hadn't even noticed it. My success wasn't about revenge. It was about proving that I could do it without them, without their favoritism, without their expectations that I would just quietly fade into the background. I had to stop myself from responding to the rumors. The only way forward was to keep my eyes on the prize and stay focused on building my own brand. It wasn't easy, but I had already walked away from everything I had once known. Now I was carving a path that was uniquely mine. As the months turned into a year, things only got better. The brand grew exponentially. Our second collection was even more successful than the first. We had a waiting list for every drop. People loved the personal touch, the attention to detail, and the fact that they were supporting a brand that cared about quality, not just profit. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the relationships I built along the way. My old team from Kane Kids, the ones who had quit, the ones who had walked away from their high-paying jobs to join me, became the heart and soul of my new brand. Rocco, Bianca, and the others believed in me from the very beginning. And together, we turned Bristol Kane Studio into something bigger than I had ever imagined. We opened our first flagship store on Madison Avenue, and I had never felt prouder. I stood there in the showroom, looking at the walls filled with designs I had created, knowing that this was just the beginning. My past was behind me, and I was finally in control of my own destiny. Meanwhile, Kane Kids was dying a slow death. My parents had lost everything, and Lennox was working retail at a mall. They had sold their house, their assets, and their luxury lifestyle. The country club memberships were gone. The Range Rover had been repossessed. The life they had once lived was over. But despite all the losses, I didn't take joy in their downfall. What I took joy in was knowing that I had finally taken control. I had built something that could never be taken from me. I created my own legacy, and I had done it the right way. I didn't wish ill on them. I simply moved on. And that was the hardest part for me to realize, that it was okay to leave the past behind. There were no apologies from my parents, no thank yous for the years of hard work I had put in, but I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need their approval. What I had built was enough. 6 months after opening my first pop-up, I received a letter from the old Kane Kids corporate office. It was a simple note on heavy cream stock, a thank you for everything I had done for the company. It wasn't from my parents. It was from the company's legal department, acknowledging that I was entitled to nothing. And yet, I felt no anger, no bitterness. Instead, I took that letter, framed it, and hung it in my office. It was a reminder of how far I had come, how much I had fought for, and how I had done it without them. It was my moment of closure, the final piece that allowed me to walk away from a company that had never truly been mine. Today, Bristol Kane Studio is in 40 countries, and we're growing faster than ever. We employ over 200 people, all of whom are paid what they're worth. We have a global client base that understands our values, our commitment to quality, and our passion for design. As for me, I don't just own a brand. I own my future. I own every decision I make, every collection I create, and every inch of space I occupy. I own the lessons learned, the battles fought, and the sacrifices made. I never imagined that I would have to lose everything to finally find myself, but I did. I learned that loyalty without documentation is just a story you tell yourself, that contracts are thicker than blood, and that the law doesn't care who cried harder at Christmas dinner. And the most important lesson of all, the people who love you the most can still destroy you if you let them. But if you take control, if you take what's yours and build it with your own hands, no one can ever take it away. So, to anyone out there who's struggling, feeling overworked, undervalued, and unnoticed, know this. Your worth is not defined by someone else's choices. It is defined by what you build afterward. It's never too late to take control of your own future. I walked away from everything once. I built something new. And now, I'm living the life I always dreamed of, on my own terms. To everyone who has supported this journey, who has followed me through the ups and downs, thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. And to my parents and Lennox, thank you for the lessons. They weren't easy, but they were exactly what I needed.